Serious, military or police service members of Reddit, what are the most spooky unexplainable things to have happened to you in your career? I don't really believe in supernatural stuff, but I have a few odd experiences. I started my army career at West Point. If you've never seen the campus, it's basically a creepy gothic castle in upstate New York. Instead of dorms we have barracks which from 0610 were falling apart and had no AC. My sophomore year, I was assigned to the so-called Lost 50s barracks which were supposedly haunted. I was an engineer student, so I was pretty sleep deprived. I heard a lot of noises and random doors shutting, but at the time I figured the ghosts can have me if they want. The engineering program at WP is miserable lol. Fast forward to 2011 in Afghanistan. My best friend and college roommate was killed in an ambush. The day after it happened I had a dream where we had a conversation and he told me to watch out for IEDs. He said when the road turns to loose dirt, you need to watch out. I woke up pretty sad and figured I had that dream because he was on my mind. I grabbed my gear and went on a routine convoy security mission. My vehicle struck an IED later that day on a dirt road and I ended up getting some stitches. Edit. Did not expect this much attention. Thanks everyone for the kind words. It's been a while since I lost my friend, but such is life and the best thing we can do is to be grateful for what we have. More on the unexplainable side. So I was in Afghanistan around 2011-2012. And we're all watching the Predator feeds because it's the start of the shift and no patrols had kicked off yet. We see one had tracked a motorcycle carrying 3 people. One with a bag over their head and facing backwards. We're all getting anxious because we know it's a kidnapping and we might see this poor guy get murdered. Sure enough, they lead him out to the woodline. Afghanistan is not a desert unlike what the media portrays. And have him kneel down. They wait 5 minutes. Then pick him back up onto the bike. They end up in the closest town and we're getting more anxious now because they stop in the middle of the town and push him up against the wall. Then this ice cream cart is pushed into view. The guys take the hood off and hand the kidnapped guy the ice cream cart. Then he goes around the town selling ice cream. I was a dispatcher for a few years. One night, on our closed radio channel, came the sound of static and a person mumbling something. At first, there was too much static to hear what was being said. This continued for a few seconds at a time for an hour or two. Eventually, my co-worker and I were able to pick 2 words out of the static. Help me. Double quote. Everything that is broadcasted over the radio is recorded, as well as logging which officer's radio made the broadcast. But when my co-worker and I went back to look for the recordings and logs, nothing was there. Nobody outside of our department should have had access to the channel. Apparently, this happens to a few dispatchers at the department every now and then, and the eerie voice always eludes being recorded. I was J4 for my squadron and securing lodging for an upcoming op in northern Afghanistan. We went to a compound with 2 large towers. Inside them hundreds of rooms for our guys. My job was to inspect all the rooms to make sure they had beds, pillows, etc. Thing is, this is northern Afghanistan and this compound has been abandoned for years. Not even Afghans are around here. Since there were 2 towers, we had security check the area for people. Once it was confirmed no one was there, I split off from my SGT to inspect the rooms. I was on the 3rd floor going room to room, whistling and inspecting when a door slammed. I freaked. I yelled stop and pointed my gun. No respond. I yelled again. No response. Fear is in my voice. A round is in the chamber. I back away. And as I'm making my way to the stairs another door slams. I f-king scramble. I don't know what's up there but I wasn't sticking around. Grab my SGT. And we both check it out. There is nothing there. No wind. No people. Nothing. To this day I don't know what was up there. But I stopped going anywhere alone after that. Spooky? Not so much. Weird? Yeah. I work as artillery support. I go out to the field with them and make sure they don't have to suffer through their scrapes and boo-boos. I'm almost sure that deer know when hunting season is. In season I never see them. Out of season they are everywhere. I crawled out of my sack one morning to find 3 deer in the woods behind my vehicle. Ignored them and started making my coffee and some breakfast. One of them walked up to me and sniffed at my food. I told her to FCK off. She tried to get at it again. I promptly swatted her face away because that's my food, the deer can blow me. She snorted or whatever deer equivalent is and smacked my tray with her snout. The other 2 deer came and ate my food while I watched. Had to eat an MRE and watch deer eat my eggs and toast. US Navy submariner for 8 years. One time I fell asleep on the sub, which there is very little time for, and I was so exhausted I dreamt of what I would later tell my friend, the dreamfish. The dreamfish attaches itself to our sub when we dive deep enough, and uses some kind of brainwave ability to influence our dreams and read our thoughts. During which, while we fully realize and understand that the fish is influencing our dreams, it even communicated, "I dreamed." Not through words. Just like emotional suggestions. It was the craziest, weirdest dream I have ever had. Now, I fully believe this is not a real thing, but I've had subsequent dreamfish dreams. Only when we were below a certain depth, I'd wake up and figure out what depth we were at during my time of sleep, which I wouldn't have bothered to know before sleeping. Does this fish exist? Probably not. Fall asleep beneath the ocean waves and see if it finds you as well. I don't know about spooky, but the most unexplainable thing I can think of is why are we outside the armory at 0530 when we aren't picking up weapons until 0900 and moving to the training area until 1100. Copy pasting because I've mentioned this story a couple times before. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, one of my frequent tasks was to help the guy flying the Raven, small UAV with an IR camera on it, at night, looking for insurgents planting bombs in the roads. Usually pretty boring. One night, however, we noticed a circular hot spot in the corner of the camera's view. After flying around a bit to get a better view, me and the operator were wondering what in the hell this featureless hot sphere was. In white cold black hot. This thing was solid, darkest black, and was unmoving for about 5 minutes, after which it rapidly moved down, nearly to the ground. We were flying at about 160 feet AGL, then back up into the sky and out of range of the Raven. We called up the TOC about this UFO. They said it must have been a glitch. They had nothing on satellite view in that area. When we went back to review the footage, kept on a specialized Tubic laptop, the 5 minutes with the UFO in it were missing. When I was in the Navy I worked in aviation. During my deployment I was on the flight deck during the day once. Now the Navy is super protective of the flight space over aircraft carriers. Nothing comes close without alert jets taking off. One morning I look up and we all see this aircraft. Red star in the vertical stab. Just cruising along directly above the deck. They always tell us how the Russians are always testing our airspace and how we always react. But that aircraft was just chillin'. Few thousand feet above our flight deck. Coast Guard was standing helm lookout watch on a ship in the middle of the Bering Sea, completely isolated for miles around. While standing the helm watch, steering the ship, we got a sudden, very pronounced radar blip behind us. The officer of the deck rang up to the lookout, who reported seeing something making a wake, but it disappeared. Due to the shape of the superstructure, the lookout's fixed big eyes binoculars were blocked directly aft by the exhaust stacks. The radar blip disappeared too. Our only guess was that it was a Russian or US submarine that popped up to the surface and then dove again. Gave me a chill to know that we weren't as alone as I had thought. Another time it was mid-watch in the middle of the night, 12 to 4 AM, dark. Very foggy. Calm seas. The lookout came down. He relieved me on the helm and I relieved him as lookout, and he made an offhand comment. "Man, sure is spooky out there." Well, the rest of that watch was spent looking over my shoulder. And every time our foghorn sounded I just about jumped out of my skin. It was so calm and so foggy that nothing could be seen beyond the fog that was illuminated by our navigation lights. I still get chills thinking about it even though I know we were completely alone and there was nothing lurking behind me. The fact that I was on the Coast Guard's oldest ship, which had lots of ghost stories, didn't really help. I work in corrections. From the CCTV monitors in the supervisor's control booth you can see onto some of the inmate housing unit control booths where my deputies sit and observe the inmates. One night, I was watching the above mentioned monitors and saw my deputies sitting in the control booth. Called him and asked him who was in the control booth with him. He said no one. Which no one should have been because REA was an emergency call that everyone had gone to. The thing is, I could clearly see someone standing behind him. I watched the figure stand there while he walked around looking for what I was talking about. As soon as he sat down and picked the telephone back up, it disappeared. As soon as I could, I went back to review the security footage to show him what I was talking about. The figure was not there on the recorded footage. Think about it every time I see that camera angle on the monitor. And I get the chills every time to this day. Was 6 years ago. Navy here. After lights out the whole ship turns on red lights instead of white lights. So all the passageways, halls, are dimly illuminated by eerie red light. Being sleep deprived and hearing unexplained noises are common. Can't say one instance but lots of small WTF was that? Double quote. So, on watch one night me and my buddy were joking around. We were given strict orders not to go beyond the ECP. For any reason. Seems fair. Well, about 20 minutes into the watch we both start shivering despite it being a warm and humid night. Maybe another 15 minutes and we hear a blood-curdling scream from the woods about 10 yards from the post. I'm talking it sounded like a woman was being stabbed. Over and over again. It was at least 10 seconds of straight screaming. When morning came around, we asked. And we were told no one was out and no one was supposed to be in the area except for our guys. I served in the SAF as a combat medic. And was tasked to lead a medical support team for a training course in Brunei. Due to one of my medics falling sick out in the field, I had the privilege of taking his place and spending the night with an officer and a warrant officer, WO, on a narrow ridgeline in MT Bayang, which was apparently a navigation exercise checkpoint for the trainees. As night fell, we were warned by the officer to refrain from sleeping in the middle of the ridgeline as we ran the risk obstructing the path of any wandering spirits. Out of respect, we took the advice and constructed our hammocks as close to the sides of the ridgeline as we dared. Being a light sleeper, I kept being roused by the sound of the occasional heavy footstep walking by, crunching on the dead leaves and sticks on the ground. The footsteps sounded human. But at that point of time at night, nobody was supposed to navigate the mountain in pitch black. The next morning, my auditory experience was validated when all three of us found fresh tracks, too big to belong to any animal, on the ground that appeared in inconsistent intervals. While I was stationed in Cherry Point, I had the duty of inspecting the Marines barracks on Thursday morning after field day. Most rooms were normal. Dust bunnies here. Scum stain there. But one day I stumbled across something disturbing. I went through one Marine's room. He was a Ravi cat. And I noticed his wall locker was unlocked. Whenever I see unlocked wall lockers, I would go through them just for kicks. Well, this devil had somehow accumulated about 20 pairs of women's underwear. Some were even marked. When confronted, SNM stated, "It's not a crime to have women's thongs. Turns out, it is when you steal it from the laundry room." Saw a weird orange ball flying around the night sky in Iraq once. Hella weird. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces deployed in Afghanistan a few years ago. I was marksman in a team of 6. We were stationed to protect a dangerous goods route. No royal buildings near us for at least 20 kilometers. The area alone was not active at all compared to the rest of the stations. Anyway, we spent about 9 hours there with no traffic or any contact. In Afghanistan during the summer, it's very bright out and you could see anything coming miles away. I remember it being still light out and there was an unidentified shot that came our direction and hit our jeep. We took our positions and I looked where I thought the shot come from. I'm not a try and counter sniper, but when I looked, it was just bare desert. Not even thick grass or bushes. We held out for another 4 hours. We got the call to move out by command and we did. I still wonder where that shot came from time to time. When in the RAF I was based at Scampton. This was the base where the Dambasters raid was launched from and a bomber command airfield during the war. I was on guard duty one night and had a phone call around 2 AM about noises coming from one of the hangars. Sent a guard to investigate. He radios back and says he can hear voices mumbling and what sounds like machinery operating and tools clanging etc etc. I got out the keys to the hangar and on driving up, sure enough there were such noises going on and the occasional flickering light. We called in the RAF police dogs but the land shark refused to go in. This highly trained attack dog laid down, whimpered and refused to listen to its handler. I went in with the guard and the RAF policeman and can only describe the feeling on entering the hangar floor as being surrounded in a cold fog that you couldn't see and a real feeling of dread. There was a real feeling of unhappiness in the place. I have never felt like that since. Nor do I ever want to. We hightailed it out as it was secure and there was clearly no one there. Found out about a year or so later, when speaking to some visiting Bomber Command veterans, that it was a hangar used in the war for battle repairs on the damaged aircraft and sometimes were aircraft which had crew members killed in them. And sometimes it took some time to either extract their bodies or gather up the bits. Would be taken to be cleaned. I have been back to Scampton since, but I give that hangar a very wide berth. Nothing too amazing. But I used to be a tank commander in the Marines. I was out in the field one night and had a dream that I was driving slowly down a road and had another tank strike mine at a 90-degree angle on my front left armor skirt. The next day, I was slowly leaving an assault lane and my LT's tank was driving blind. He was infamously shitty at his job, at a high rate of speed from the left and struck my tank directly where I dreamed it had. Similarly, I had a predictive dream in high school about my friend flipping his car the night before he actually did. I don't really believe in psychic phenomenon, but my two experiences were pretty weird. Not spooky, just mind-boggling, and I can't explain it. Had a guy in my BOLC, it's basic for army officers, that was very clearly autistic or on the spectrum. Would panic under pressure all the time, barely passed every event. We found out he recycled basic and federal OCS, but somehow he just kept slipping through. He is a danger to himself and others, but as near as we could figure everyone just kept passing the buck. FCK apart, he's not a bad person, just incompetent. He was Army Reserves but he got a call to active duty, so I feel for any platoon that gets him. His reserve unit wanted to get rid of him as much as possible. My marine company were waking up before sunrise at 29 Palm Springs. It was maybe 5:30 in the morning. Everyone is sitting on their backpacks awaiting orders. When all of a sudden we see 5 bright lights coming from behind a hill that was about 200 feet away. The lights rapidly went straight up without a sound. Then made a movement like a snake for several minutes and then in an instant disappeared from sight. We all saw it. Even the company commander saw it. He called for a company formation in the dark night. Sort of unusual to do that at night. He told us, listen, we all saw it and we know what it was. Don't ever mention it to anyone outside this company while you are still enlisted. I'll take care of this myself. So keep quiet and let's get ready to start the patrol. This happened in 1995. Spooky shit. Not police or military but a firefighter I have two that I found creepy. The first was an old church that in the 70s a local business bought. They used it as file storage before the building was condemned for not being livable. We got called for a remote alarm through a security company. A pretty standard call. Anyways, on arrival, we did a 360 walk around. Couldn't see anything but found a few broken windows. So we make entry through the front and just walk around with just flashlights. The dust, decaying rooms and creaking of wood from other teams walking was unsettling. Then the audible alarm sounded. just about jumped out of our skin. We find the panel shutted off, and as we turn around 2 cops are standing behind us. One surprise jump and hearty laugh later and we were out having found nothing. The second was smoke in the building at a telecom relay house, where they keep local servers for phone and internet. We were walking around, could smell electronics burning, see hazy smoke, but didn't find a fire. Additionally, the whole building had a very Stranger Things vibe that none of us could shake. During the last round of mutual fuckery between Israel and Gaza, we took hold of a house in a city in the north of the Gaza Strip. One day we see a light grey, nearly white donkey with a foal coming towards us. After a quick discussion with the commanders, it was decided that we should open fire in fear that Hamas might have planted a bomb in the donkey's stomach. So we shoot. Pretty sure we hit it a few times and they both ran away and did not return. So far not that weird, right? When we were done in that hellhole and I came back home, I talked to my friend from another unit and casually brought the donkey story up. He said they had the exact same experience, down to the color of the donkey. Checked up with friends from various units. Sure enough, nearly everyone had the same experience, even ones that were much farther away. It's not really too spooky, but my unit was in New Mexico for training for 2 months at White Sands. We were shooting a night range, and it looked like someone had turned on a decently bright light. And of course everyone got mad because it fucks without NVGS. Well, then there was what sounded like the loudest clap of thunder I've ever heard. And everyone looked up and stopped shooting. A giant meteorite had just passed through the atmosphere and blew up and lit the entire sky up as bright as day. I work supply in the Air Force, and we have a couple creepy stories about our warehouse that I always thought were just the other guys having fun. So one night I stayed up real late and decided to go sleep at the shop to catch a couple hours of sleep before work. I kept all the lights off and passed out in the office. And about an hour in I start to wake up to all these noises. Sounds like someone's running around the warehouse. So I'll look out the doorway and don't see anything. And all of a sudden there's a crash in the room next to mine. The chair was spinning and stopped perfectly facing the desk I was at. And all the computer screens turned on. I went outside and smoked till everyone else showed up, lol. On a routine patrol on my Coast Guard cutter in the Eastern Pacific. Late at night a few hundred miles offshore. I'm on the helm and the late night bridge watch conversations are the usual. People telling a few spooky stories. The radio crackles suddenly and everyone shuts up. Since it's monitoring channel 16, which is international hailing and distress. We get static for 20 or 30 seconds. Then singing. Someone is singing nonsensibly into their radio. It stops after a while and we all kind of freak out. Later in the watch the bridge windshield wipers turned on their own. The ocean at night is weird. While doing Queen's Guard at Windsor Castle in the UK. After the castle closes to the public, the guards are in their own time to relax. At night there were a couple of occasions where an organ could be heard playing from inside an unoccupied part of the castle. This happened at times of no royals and residents and police officers and guards on the premises searching, never finding anything. There are also stories of a soldier that hung himself in the rear gardens decades ago who many claim to have seen standing in windows at night. I personally haven't witnessed that. Also guard duty in the Tower of London. Walking around at night on your own is incredibly creepy. You really feel like you are being watched from every angle. Not exactly spooky, but when I was in boot camp I was in Ship 6, name of the barracks, about 3 months after they reopened it. It had been closed for about 5 years prior and was still going through renovations while we were there. Around midnight to 0400 weird shit would happen. It was likely the symptom of sleep deprivation, but you'd always hear footsteps. Occasionally see something moving outside the porthole on the door to the open bay. And everyone on the second and third decks swore they saw either a recruit or horse walking around up there. Thing is, some dude did kill himself in that building a couple years before they closed it. Or so I've been told. At my current station though there's a bunch of vampire deer that make it onto base. And last year when I was on nights there was a deer that liked the parking lot outside my building. We have cameras that cover said parking lot, and I once saw that deer looking up at the camera for a minute or two. At first it was spooky to see a deer with fangs look right back at me, but then it got kinda cool. And unsettling. Taking a manual weather observation at night at Gunsanab, Korea. See a meteor explode. Not just fizzle out. Go in and check some meteor observing sites. None of them had recorded it. Check back a week later. Still nothing. Not spooky. But I can't explain it. Creepiest ever for me was getting human looking heat signatures over a graveyard while scanning with my LRAS. There shouldn't have been opfer and it wasn't my scouts, so it got me creeped out good. My sister was a cop for a few years in the Scottish Highlands, and once she responded to an apparent suicide up on a hill. Small old farm shack often used by hikers, and one had hanged himself inside. The only weird part is this same shack has had 3 suicides in the past 25 or so years, and yet hikers still sleep in it regularly. The guy who owned the stack's been dead for a long time, but was apparently quite a nasty old bugger. I doubt there's any spookiness really happening, but it didn't stop locals from talking like there was. Google Okinawa ghosts. There are hundreds of creepy stories. I personally experienced a lot of creepy moments working in Naval Hospital Okinawa, which is no longer being used. An empty shell of a hospital sits on Camp Lester, but the basement of that hospital still has bloodstains all over the walls. I remember my 4th year, right before I PCSD, one of the janitors took me down there. It used to be the morgue, and this sweet old Japanese man had been around for years. I mean decades. He told me how he used to pick up body parts that had fallen out of body bags. It was gruesome back when the hospital first opened. Personally for me, the woman on the 5th deck ramp. I would go upstairs to help cover labor and delivery, and the hospital had ramps to help transport in case of typhoons and elevators shutting down. I'll never forget transporting a sleeping mother over to postpartum when I looked out of the window and saw a head. A floating head right outside the window. Others have seen it too, but I'm so creeped out by it I just chalk it up to sleep deprivation. After Navy boot camp, I got put on hold and sent to the other side of the Great Lakes base, where they were forced to open up condemned out of service barracks to stick me and 6 other Airedale buddies of mine in. We spent most of our time acting as first lieutenant duty section leaders to prepare for the other Airedales that would arrive from graduating boot camp divisions that would also be put on hold. The Pensacola base, which is where would wind up going for a school, got torn up during Hurricane Irene. In these barracks there was 4 different wings. 2 which we had opened up, brought back to life for newly graduated sailors to live in, and the other 2 were empty. Every night during our midnight 0600 watch we would see a light switch on in a room in the empty wing. And every night we would investigate it. We opened the door and no one would be in there, but there would be a Bible open up to a specific page on the empty bunk rack, and it would just scare the shit out of us. I also remember hearing about all sorts of sailors committing suicide over the years on that base, as well as the enlisted club and base movie theater being haunted as fuck. It wasn't anything crazy, but we were getting off guard shift in Qatar and started trying to figure out some of the constellations, but suddenly 3 stars just took off across the sky. We talked about it for a while, but eventually we just moved on and blamed it on a weird shooting star or something. Was watching a bridge over some railroad tracks in Anbar province, Iraq. It was the 31st of October. Freak electrical storm rolls in. Antennas on my Apollo start looking like one of those glass electricity balls you stick your hands on as a kid. Now that was pretty weird, but what made the situation spooky was my second truck was watching another part of the road about 1 kilometer away, so we were really all alone at night. Halloween night. Flipped the truck around so I had my turret facing the bridge and me and the driver could watch. Our 6 could not get out of there quicker come morning. Nothing out of the ordinary, just crazy night with that being watched feeling. A story my brother looked to tell. Says he was on a ship at night during his watch. And everything was dark as usual. He looks onward and sees what is clearly a silhouette of a man in the distance. But it's black as hell on the ship, so he's a literal silhouette. The guy seems to be standing forward, facing my brother when he sets his hands on the side of his head. Then yanks up, seemingly removing his own head. My father was a radio operator back in the military. Well, you see, in my country the paratroopers were kinda considered the elite forces. So one night as their base is sleeping, they drop in nearby and capture all the guards and lookouts, and in the morning give the honors to the colonel. The strange thing is how a medium to large base didn't notice any of this. Seems kinda SF to me. It felt like the longest walk of my life. I wanted to run back to the guard room, haha. One of the guys in my old platoon swears he saw the ghost of a young boy at a window in the tower. That is apparently a common sighting of a young prince from centuries ago. Edit. I massively regret not taking full advantage of the time I spent on ceremonial duties in all 4 of the residences. I was stationed there in 2002. Had a chick making her rounds in one of the barracks and took one of them home with her. Only for him to find out that she was actually a he. Lol, she was banned from base for her safety. I am neither formed the military or police service, but my parents told me a story of one of their friends. This lady friend of my parents was invited to sleep in a castle in Belgium around 10 years ago. She was given a room, which was located in one of the castle mains towers. She slept there, and the next morning, she told her guests that she felt like people have been killed in this room and that a lot of blood has been shed. The owners checked their castle archives and realized that, I don't remember when, but during 1200-1800 AC I suppose, there has been people slaughtered in this same room. If I remember correctly, there has been family fights where they killed each other. Not sure what happens next, but pretty sure no one slept in that room again.